everyone, my name is ZeBirdBrain and today we are talking about rigging. So I'm not going to teach you exactly how to rig one thing, I'm just going to give you like general tips about rigging and I hope you enjoy it. So, rigging is not easy. In rigging, the saying is that there is no right way to do it, but there are many wrong ways to do it. Today I'm going to teach you a bit about the main wrong things that I see whenever I correct rig, like I help or I do like consulting services for a studio. You know, the little things that might hinder your production down the line. And you know, disclaimer, I say these things, but maybe for some little case somewhere in a production, it might actually work, okay? So, you know, it's just tips and tricks. Take it if it helps you, and if you think what I'm saying is total bullshit, then don't listen to it and do whatever you please. Okay, let's go! I'm gonna use Ellie today because she's cool, and some of you in the comments said you were annoyed of seeing Woo all the time, so here you go. I give you a new rig. This is Ellie. She's cool, she's green, and she's amazing. Let's use Ellie to see some little rigging tips and tricks. And whenever I do my rigs, I rarely do like a full 360 because my life is way too short for me to waste my time doing a full 360 rig. And that's actually one of the good advice I can give. You don't need a 360 rig of a character. She's perfectly useful going from profile to quarter front to quarter front to profile. This is very smooth. Like if I tween it, it's gonna tween okay. What is not gonna tween okay is when she goes quarterback to back. This doesn't tween that well. But you know, it's not often that you will need it to tween super well from profile to quarter front to back. In the time that I'm gonna need that, I'm just gonna figure it out in that shot. And like maybe it's just gonna be like a close-up of her head, right? Because usually whenever a character turns, you can cheat it. You can make it turn in a way that you don't need 50 little frames of her slowly turning. Okay, it looks impressive, it looks amazing. Like, if you're able to do that, good job, it's great. But it also makes your rig heavy for not much of a good reason, okay? If you have a story which the whole point is to have a camera turn around your characters and they need to turn 360 for some reason, fine. But let's be honest, this is not most of the situations, okay? So, my first advice, you don't need to have a rig that perfectly tweens from back to front. Oftentimes, profile to front is more than enough. And you know, making a rig that is tweening from front to profile, that's already hard, okay? So good job if you can do that. And remember, if you don't need it, don't do it. Like if you're working on a preschool show that is very like pose to pose and quick, you don't need that, okay? But let's say that you did need your character to like smoothly tween from front to profile and you want to put some master controllers in there so that it can like rotate and stuff, which is fair. I love that. I think it makes animation easier. Like my heads are almost always smoothly going from front to profile. My body, not all the time, okay? It depends on the character. So, when you do your rotations for a rig to go from front to profile, here are some very important tips and tricks on the subject. So, first, pivot points. Because pivot points are super easy, but also so freaking complicated to understand when you do rigging. Like, some people think that the hardest part of rigging is like learning how to use deformers and shit. No, it's knowing how to place your stupid pivot point. It's a science on its own, okay? So my biggest advice I can give on this, and this changed the way I do rigging, because at first I had no fucking clue what to do. I was like, a pivot point, and if it goes on the profile, I guess I'm gonna move the torso with the pivot. And I'm gonna move the peg, and the pivot's gonna move. Right, this is wrong. Usually it's not good to do that, okay? So, advice. If you have a character that you wanted to move smoothly with a master controller from front to profile, my advice is that your pivot point of like your main peg, like your torso peg, the one that makes your character be able to be cut in half. That one. Okay, that peg, leave it alone in the rotation as much as you can. Okay, if you're rigging a centaur, that's different. Okay, we're gonna talk about quadrupeds another time. I'm talking about like a basic two-footed creature. Boom. Unless it's missing a leg. You know, biped. Yeah, biped creature that looks like a human thing. When you have that, and you have your top peg here, try to not move it. So how do you make the other poses? The trick is to use the deformers as much as you can. Okay, so I'm gonna show you what happens with this little torso frog thing here. I'm gonna turn on the deformers, and you're gonna see that my peg doesn't move. If I go get my coordinate, you're gonna see there's no movement on that peg. So all is done with the deformer. What this means is that whenever I try to use the slider master controller, or like the other one, the grid one, I will not get movement on my pegs. When I try to tween something, it's not gonna go haywires. Then all you have to do is use the deformer points instead. And to do that, my biggest advice is make good use of these two icons, because then instead of moving the peg left and right with your keyboard or something, you can just select the points of the deformer. Of course, just one piece of your deformer, not two pieces. I don't know why these are showing up, but whatever. Just select your points, and then you can move the point of the deformer instead of moving the peg. Sometimes for the torso, it's not so bad to move the peg, but it's really for the face. Because I know that a lot of you ask me questions when you do your head rotation on your master controllers. You're like, oh, it's weird because when I try to move it, the head just like leaves the neck. Yeah, the head is gonna leave the neck because if you rotate your character around and to put the head on the neck, you had to kind of move it, like to attach it to the neck. It means that whenever you move your master controller, even if your body here is standing still, if you move your master controller, you're gonna have the thing where like your head pops out. This is because you put keyframes on the head. Don't do that. But how do I get my head shape to move and shit? What you do is you use your deformers, okay? So if I click on my head here, or my chin, you're gonna see there's deformers. What do you know? The pivot here doesn't change because I didn't animate the peg. All the movement is done using the deformers, which means that whenever I try to use the master controller in the future and I want to move the head around, I will not have the jaw like going places when I try to move the head. So wherever I put the head, it's going to be there. And if I use a slider master controller or the grid master controller, it's always going to stay in place and only like the head will move on its axis. It's not going to travel somewhere. And I say all this, but like this is mistakes that I made. I was done with my rig and when I tried to animate it, it sucked. And then I asked questions and people told me, yeah, you need to never move the peg on the head, you idiot. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. Okay, so like everybody learns. I learned that like way more recently than I would have liked it. So when you do your head rotations, move your deformers, not your pegs, okay? Does this apply to the face? Absolutely not. The face, you move that on a peg. That's normal, okay? So here, I always have a peg that holds like the whole face together. And when I move it, what I do is I move that whole system, like the whole stupid face. I take it and I move it with the head. And I try to use the nose to center it where it would be in the middle of the face. So that's my biggest guideline. And I do that because then it's going to help it tween very well, okay? And if I want to make a head tilt or something, it's very easy to just take my whole face and like move it around. So it's good to have a peg that holds your whole face together. And like I said, whenever I move my face, I just move it along. And then I go like down. If my eye needs to move a little bit, I'm going to take my eye and move it. But I'm not going to move just the individual pieces if I have a peg holding everything, okay? Always start from the peg that contains the most object and then go more specific. Yeah, I hope that this helps you into making your rig and that you don't make the same mistake as I did. So try to use a deformer as much as you can before you use the peg. Especially for your head shapes. I can't stress it enough. Head shapes, you see, whenever I turn, the pivot is always in the same place. Yes, it's not perfect because in the profile, sometimes you'll be like, I wish the head moved from another place. Like this, like, but you know, you can, whenever you need to do that, you can always move the pivot point temporarily and you know, move it. It's really better to have your head pegs still as much as you can. Trust me, I tried it so many times. It's, for me actually, at least it's better. Maybe you're used to something different, but usually it's shown to be easier to move your rig if you keep most of your peg still as much as you can. And like I said, this doesn't apply to smaller pieces that follow the bigger pieces. So like your face or like my arms. Of course, I'm not going to move all the deformers of my pieces of my arm. I move the arm around. That's normal, okay? I'm really talking about like the middle pieces of your rig, like your heads, your torso, this dress here. I try to keep it as still as I can, just that it tweens better when I need to, okay? So I hope this was helpful, and it's been a way of a longer video than I wanted it to be. So have a wonderful day, and I'm going to see you again next time for more tips and tricks. Goodbye!